Picture this. 600 of Korea's most powerful, most wealthy, most connected people, all gathered in one glittering ballroom. Crystal chandeliers, designer gowns, champagne that costs more than most people's monthly rent. And right in the middle of all that wealth and elegance, one woman is being publicly humiliated. Her boss, the man she had worked herself to the bone for 11 straight months, stands up, taps his glass, and fires her. Right there, in front of everyone. No warning, no decency. Just 2 security guards and the long, burning walk across that marble floor while 200 pairs of eyes follow her every step. She holds her head up. She doesn't cry. She walks toward those doors with everything she has left, which, at that moment, feels like almost nothing. The doors swing open. And then, the entire room goes silent again. Different this time. The kind of silence that only happens when someone walks in, and the air itself decides to pay attention. She turns around. And standing at the entrance is the most feared man in Seoul, surrounded by 4 men in dark suits, dark eyes scanning the room like he owns everything in it, including the walls. He crosses the ballroom. He stops right in front of her, this woman who just lost her job, whose face is still burning, who is standing between 2 security guards with a clutch in her hand and nowhere to go. And in a voice that carries to every corner of that room, he says, "Why are these men touching my wife? Stay right there, because what you are about to find out is going to shock you, move you, and keep you glued to every single word. This is not just a story about revenge. This is a story about a woman who was underestimated by everyone around her, and what happened when she finally stopped apologizing for existing. You need to watch this until the very end. Trust me, the ending will make everything worth it. And before we get into it, drop a comment right now and tell me, where are you watching from? I want to know your city, your country. Let's see how far this story travels. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, hit that button right now. You do not want to miss a single chapter of what comes next. Let's go. I never thought the worst night of my life would also be the night everything changed. But that is exactly what happened, right there, under the golden lights of the Grand Imperial Ballroom, in front of 600 of Korea's most powerful people. One minute I was adjusting a flower arrangement. The next, my boss was firing me in front of the entire room. And then he walked in. My name is Park Mina. For 11 months, I had worked as the personal assistant to director Kang Sung-ho of Kang Industries. 11 months of arriving before sunrise. 11 months of eating lunch at my desk, answering emails at midnight, and swallowing every word I wanted to say to a man who treated his staff like furniture. I had told myself it was worth it, that the salary helped my mother, that things would get better. Tonight was the company's annual table at the Prestige Charity Gala, the most photographed social event in Seoul. My job was simple: manage the table, ensure everything ran smoothly, smile when required. I had the seating cards arranged, the wine selected, and the centerpiece adjusted 3 times until it was perfect. I was reaching across the table to fix a slightly tilted candle when Director Kang stood up. He tapped his glass. The table went quiet first, then the tables beside us. Then a wide, spreading silence moved through the room like a cold wind. "Miss Park," his voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. The silence carried it everywhere. "I've been meaning to address something all evening." I set the candle down slowly. My hands were steady. The rest of me was not. "The donor summary you submitted this week contained serious errors." He straightened his tie without looking at me. "Errors that embarrassed this company in front of our board members this morning." He paused for effect. I could see him enjoying it. "I will not be requiring your services any further. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out." 200 eyes turned to my face. I did not cry. I had promised myself, years ago, that I would never cry in front of people who wanted to see it. "Director Kang," I said, keeping my voice quiet and even, "the report you're referring to was submitted under your approval signature. I have the email timestamp saved." His expression didn't change. "Security." 2 men in black appeared at my sides. They walked me across the entire ballroom, past every single table, past every whisper, past Mrs. Kang's small, satisfied smile, toward the main entrance. My heels clicked against the marble floor. My face burned. The double doors swung open in front of me. And then the entire room went silent again. Differently this time. The kind of silence that only happens when someone walks in and the air itself decides to pay attention. I turned around. Standing at the entrance, flanked by 4 men in identical dark suits, was Shin Ji-woo, the man whose name people in Seoul said carefully, like it was something that could cut you. Chairman of Shin Holdings' private division, 34 years old. The tabloids called him the shadow of Gangnam. Everyone else just called him dangerous. He was exactly as terrifying in person as every story suggested: dark eyes, absolute stillness, the quiet authority of someone who had never needed to raise his voice, because the room always went silent before he opened his mouth. Those eyes found me immediately, standing between 2 security guards, clutch in hand, cheeks burning. He crossed the ballroom, stopped in front of me, and in a voice low but perfectly clear, he said, "Why are these men touching my wife?" The confusion that moved through that ballroom was electric. Mine was worse than anyone's because Shin Ji-woo and I were married, had been for exactly 4 months, and nobody anywhere knew it. That had been the entire point. 4 months earlier, I had been desperate. My mother needed a second surgery, serious, expensive, the kind that cost more than I made in 2 years. I had tried everything. Loans, family, savings I didn't have. Then a colleague mentioned a discreet legal firm that handled unusual arrangements for wealthy clients. The arrangement had been simple. Shin Ji-woo needed a legal spouse before his 35th birthday. A clause buried in his grandfather's will tie a significant inheritance to his marital status. I needed money for my mother's operation. We met at a small office on a Tuesday morning, signed documents in front of a notary, and shook hands. He handed me an envelope and left in a black car. I went directly to the hospital. We had not spoken since. So when he said the words "my wife" in the middle of that ballroom, I stood very still and tried to breathe. Director Kang made a strangled sound. "Mr. Shin, I wasn't aware you were attending tonight." "My wife," Shin Ji-woo said again, not looking at Kang, "was being escorted out of this room. I'd like an explanation." Mrs. Kang's champagne glass stopped halfway to her lips. Kang Sung-ho went through several expressions before settling on the look of a man standing at the edge of a very tall drop. Shin Ji-woo turned to look at him, and I watched one of the most confident men I had ever worked for become, in 3 seconds, very small. "Shall we return to the table?" Shin Ji-woo said. It was not a question. He placed his hand at the small of my back and guided me toward his table, which had been sitting empty all evening because no one had been brave enough to sit near it. I sat beside him. My heart was somewhere up in the chandelier. Under the white tablecloth, without looking at me, he pressed a folded note into my hand. I opened it carefully. "Play along. I'll explain everything tonight. Your mother's second procedure, I've already arranged full payment." I read those words 3 times. Then I folded the note into my palm, lifted my chin, and looked at Mrs. Kang across the table with the calm smile I had been saving for a very long time. The gala ended at 11. I was in the back of his car by 11:15, still not entirely sure how either of those things had happened. The city moved past the tinted windows. Neither of us spoke for almost 2 minutes. "My grandfather's will required me to be married before my 35th birthday, he said finally. "That birthday is in 3 weeks. "I know, we discussed this 4 months ago. "What I didn't tell you then," he said, "is that the will also required the marriage to be publicly acknowledged before the end of the year. My legal team missed the clause until last week." I turned to look at him. "So tonight was the highest visibility social event in the city." "Yes. You used my humiliation as a backdrop for your entrance." Something moved across his expression, not quite guilt, but close enough to be notable. "I arrived when I did," he said. "I saw what was happening at the door. I made a decision." "You could have warned me." "There wasn't time." I looked back at the passing city. What does publicly acknowledged mean exactly? What does the clause require? The pause before his answer was slightly too long. Living in the same residence. Public appearances together for a minimum of 60 days. Attendance at my grandfather's memorial ceremony next month in front of the full Shin family. "My mother," he said carefully, "did not know I was married." I opened my eyes. She found out tonight. She's waiting upstairs. The car stopped in front of a building so tall its upper floors disappeared into low clouds. I looked up at it. I looked back at him. "Any advice?" I asked. He thought about it genuinely. "Stand straight," he said, "and don't apologize for existing." Her name was Shin Yunya, and she was seated in the penthouse living room like she had placed herself there deliberately, as a statement. Elegant, controlled, eyes that moved to me with the slow patience of someone who had already decided what I was before I walked in. "So," she said, "this is the girl from the courthouse." She already knew. "I had his legal team pull the certificate 3 hours ago. I know exactly what this arrangement is." Her eyes moved over me. "A contract, and contracts can be broken." "Mrs. Shin," I said, calm, every word placed carefully. "With respect, I'm not asking for your approval. The marriage is legal. The inheritance clause is satisfied. And if you pursue an annulment before the 60-day public requirement is met, your son loses the full inheritance permanently." I folded my hands on my knee. "I've read the complete document, have you?" Silence. Beside me, I felt something shift in Jiwoo's posture. Yunya's eyes narrowed slightly. "You'll regret being clever with me," she said quietly. "I've spent my whole life regretting things on behalf of other people," I said. "I've decided to stop." She stood, smoothed her dress, and walked to the elevator without another word. When the doors closed, Jiwoo said, "That was either very brave or very unwise." "Probably both," I said, and for exactly 1 second he almost smiled. I moved into the penthouse 2 days later with 2 suitcases and a box of books. Jiwoo's assistant Tiho met me at the entrance with a laminated card. Household guidelines. No outside guests without notice. No discussion of Shin Holdings matters. No social media without approval. Separate bedrooms. Weekly briefing on obligations. It read exactly like the employee handbook I had received at Kang Industries, just nicer paper. "Any questions?" Jiwoo asked from across the room. "Is there a performance review at 90 days, or do I receive a severance package?" He blinked, then briefly, genuinely, he smiled. A real one, 2 seconds. Then he recovered and turned toward his office, but I had seen it. I filed it away. That night, a note appeared under my bedroom door. Plain paper, small, neat handwriting. "Your mother's procedure went smoothly. She is in recovery. The hospital has been instructed to provide anything she requires." I sat on the edge of my bed and held it for a long time. He had done this quietly, without being asked, without mentioning it once. That was the first small crack in what I thought I understood about him. The next morning, outside my bedroom door on the floor was a cup of coffee, still warm. That was the second. 10 days of quiet. Then the family arrived. His aunt Mrs. Ojionja walked a circle around me and announced I had the look of someone who shops on sale. 2 cousins cornered me at breakfast and asked how much Jiwoo had paid me. I told them the apartment had excellent coffee and left. Then came Hansina. 27, effortlessly polished, arrived on day 11 without knocking, sat on my couch as if it were already hers. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said, examining her nails. "Just to say, ask him why he chose you specifically. It was never random." She left. Her words stayed. That evening I had 2 coffees waiting when Jiwoo came home. I slid one across the counter. "Why me?" I asked. "You worked for Kang Sung-ho," he said slowly. "He was one of 3 people I was investigating when I needed to move quickly." I went very still. Investigating for what? He set the cup down. "That," he said, "is a longer conversation." He told me everything the night before our first public appearance. Shin Jiwoo had spent 18 months building a case against Kang Sung-ho. My former director had been stealing from the charity foundation he publicly fronted. Over 3 years, he had quietly redirected 38 billion won, meant for programs supporting children from low-income families, into a series of hidden accounts. He had been careful. He had not been careful enough. The thread unraveled through a former Kang Industries accountant who had tried to relocate quietly to Busan. The man had spoken, because Jiwoo had a particular talent for making silence the less appealing option. "What does this have to do with me?" I asked. "The donor summary," Jiwoo said. "The one he fired you for." I compiled it. "Did you notice anything unusual while you were putting it together?" I stopped. Because yes, I had. A transaction line that appeared twice under different codes. I had flagged it to Kang's finance team and been told, flatly, to leave it alone. I had filed it away in the back of my mind and forgotten about it entirely the morning I was escorted out of the gala. The version he submitted to the board the next day, Jiwoo said, had that discrepancy quietly corrected. He used you to identify the error, fired you to remove you before anyone looked closely, and erased it in the final version, leaving your name on the original draft. The blood left my face slowly. You were going to be blamed, he said, if investigators pulled the original report. Your name was on it. His signature appeared on the corrected version only. You knew this, I said, before the courthouse. His jaw tightened. How long, I asked, 3 weeks before you signed. The space between us stretched wide. So when I came to your lawyer desperate for my mother's surgery money, I said slowly, you already knew exactly what had been done to me. He met my eyes. Yes, and you said nothing. I needed the signature first. I was concerned that if I told you beforehand, the situation would become complicated. That word does a lot of work, I said quietly. I walked to my room, sat against the closed door on the floor, and stayed there a while. Then I opened my laptop and went through every document I had saved during my 11 months at Kang Industries. Because if Shin Jiwoo was building a case, I was going to make sure nothing could be argued away. The photography charity auction at the Seoul Cultural Center. Black tie. Every society column would be running photos by morning. I wore the dark green dress Tiho had selected. I did my own hair and left it down, because Yunya had suggested through Tiho that I wear it up, and I had decided to be selective about which battles I surrendered. Jiwoo was waiting at the elevator. He looked at me once and something moved across his face that wasn't assessment at all. You look, he stopped himself. Ready, I offered. Exactly right, he said, and looked away. In the car, Tiho briefed us. Who to approach, who to avoid approved topics. The photographs tonight need to communicate an established couple, Tiho said carefully. Not two people sharing an elevator by accident. I'll follow your lead, Jiwoo told me. That surprised me more than anything he had said yet. We entered together. His hand found the small of my back, the same gesture as the gala, but not the same at all. Warmer, more deliberate. 3 hours of conversation, photographs, and careful performance. Near the end of the evening, a journalist from Seoul Society Weekly appeared beside me. Mrs. Shin, how did you and the chairman first meet? I smiled. He walked into a room, I said, and decided I was worth staying for. Every word of it was true. She printed it the next morning as the opening line of a 2-page feature. Yunya called at 7. I let it ring. I listened to the voicemail twice. Her voice was perfectly controlled. That journalist piece is circulating everywhere. You gave a quote without running it through communications. I will not have my family's private life turned into entertainment. Do not mistake my son's patience for acceptance. I set my phone down. Then I forwarded 3 documents to Jiwoo's private email, files I had pulled from my saved work the night he told me about the case. Donor ledgers. A spreadsheet with a formula that didn't match its visible total. And one email chain I had been accidentally copied on 8 months ago that I had never fully understood, until now. His reply came in under 5 minutes. Where did you find the email chain? I typed back, I was CC'd on it accidentally. No one asked me to delete it. A longer pause. This changes things significantly. Can we talk this evening? I replied, after you listened to your mother's voicemail. An even longer pause, then 2 words, I'm sorry. I stared at my phone. Shin Jiwoo, a man who held rooms of powerful people in silence without raising an eyebrow, had typed 2 plain words of apology, and they landed heavier than anything else could have. That evening's conversation became something neither of us had planned. He came home early, carrying an old cloth-bound document folder. He set it on the counter between us carefully, like a man who had been deciding this for days. My grandfather left this alongside his will, he said. A sealed private letter. His instructions were for it to be opened by whoever I married. He paused. My legal team opened it expecting it to be addressed to someone else. It had your name on it. That isn't possible, I said. He passed away 8 months ago. I didn't contact your lawyer until 7 months ago. I know. He sat down. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked like someone standing on uncertain ground. My grandfather was involved in things I'm still working to understand, he said. What I know is that the letter names you specifically, your situation, the hospital your mother is in, even the name of her doctor. My hands felt cold. What does it say? He slid it across the counter. The handwriting was old-fashioned and precise. To the young woman my grandson brings home, I know what Kang Sung-ho did to you. I know because I was the person who first told him that someone on his team was looking too closely at his numbers. I did not know he would destroy an innocent person's career to protect himself. What you need is not on any computer. It is in a brown envelope in the bottom drawer of my desk at the Shin estate in Gapyeong. My grandson will take you there if you ask him. I am sorry. Shin Do-han. I read it 3 times, then I looked up at Jiwoo. His face held grief, old and quietly carried. Take me to Gapyeong, I said. Tomorrow, he said. Tonight I ordered food, the kind you mentioned once, it's in the oven. I went still. You remembered. You mentioned it 3 weeks ago, once. He opened the oven. You don't have to make it mean anything. But it already did, we both knew it. The Shin family estate in Gapyeong was everything the penthouse was not. Old stone walls, tall pine trees, long corridors holding decades of memory. The groundskeeper bowed to Jiwoo and turned to me, saying, "Welcome, Sam on him, madame," without hesitation, as if I had always been expected. The study was at the back of the main house. Dark wood bookshelves, a wide desk, the particular quiet of a room that belonged to someone no longer living. 3rd drawer, bottom left. The brown envelope was exactly where the letter said. Inside, 2 small storage drives. A handwritten page of financial records, physical, original, in Kang Sung-ho's own handwriting, showing 8 transactions matched against no official ledger I had ever seen. And a photograph. 3 men at a restaurant table. 15 years ago, maybe more. Kang Sung-ho on the left, Shin Do-han on the right. The man in the middle I did not know. Jiwoo, standing beside me, had gone completely still. Who is that? I asked. A long silence. Commissioner Bae Chun-soo, he said, current director of the Financial Investigations Division. I turned to look at him. The man who is supposed to be investigating Kang Sung-ho. Yes, was sitting at dinner with your grandfather and Kang Sung-ho. 15 years ago, yes. We stood in that quiet study with the photograph between us, and I watched Jiwoo process something. The controlled recalibration of a man who has just realized the problem is larger than the solution he had prepared. Your grandfather wasn't only trying to help me, I said slowly. He was leaving you something he couldn't release himself, because Bae had something on him. Jiwoo looked at the photograph for a long moment, then he slid everything back into the envelope. We don't go to the authorities, he said. Then what do we do? He looked up, and behind all his control, behind everything he kept so carefully, I saw it. Grief, long and private, and underneath it something harder, something decided. We finish what he started, he said, properly. We came back from Gapyeong to find Yunya had moved into the guest suite while we were away. Tiho informed me quietly that she had arrived with luggage and a home consultant who had rearranged the living room furniture. I looked at the rearranged living room. Then I went to the guest suite and knocked. She was at the vanity applying cream. I've arranged a family dinner for tomorrow evening, she said without turning. I've also spoken with my jeweler. The pieces you've been wearing don't represent the Shin name appropriately. The pieces I've been wearing were selected by your son's communications director, I said. Then his director needs better guidance. Yunya SSI. I used the formal address deliberately. I understand that my presence here wasn't what you planned. I respect that completely. But I will not be managed, not by anyone in this family. I spent 11 months being managed by a man who underestimated me, and it did not end well for him. She turned from the mirror slowly, more carefully than before. You found something in Gapyeong, she said, that surprised me. My husband told me years before he died that he had hidden something at the estate, for the right person at the right time. She looked at her hands. I knew my husband was afraid of Kang. I didn't know why until after the funeral. I have not been kind to you. Some of that is pride. Some of it I was afraid you were someone who wanted something from my son. I came wanting money for my mother's operation, I said plainly. What I have now is considerably more complicated. Something softened along her jaw, very slightly. Dinner tomorrow, she said. I'll handle the jeweler personally. It was not an apology, but from Shin Yunya it was significant. The family dinner was composed and pleasant until dessert, when Jiwoo's cousin Ryan excused himself for a phone call and returned looking like a man who had made a very poor choice and was calculating his survival. I noticed. Nobody else appeared to. At 10 that night, I knocked on Ryan's guest room door. He opened it, saw my expression, and knew immediately. "Who did you call?" I asked. He looked at the floor. "Sina," he said. "She asked me to let her know if anything came back from the estate visit. And Sina reports that information to her mother, who is close with Commissioner Bay's office." The name settled over me like cold water. I kept my face calm. "Thank you," I said, and walked away. I texted Jiwoo 3 words, check Sina's connection. His reply came in 40 seconds, already in progress. "How did you?" I typed. "Dinner, Ryan." He came back from his call looking guilty, a pause. "You caught that and I didn't." I replied, "You were managing the table. I was watching the room." His next reply was slower. "Mina, just my name. Then, thank you." 3 days later, Jiwoo's investigator confirmed everything. Sina had been feeding information to Commissioner Bay's office for 8 months, not because she was malicious, because Bay had approached her with a fabricated story, that Jiwoo's private holdings were under serious criminal investigation, that cooperating quietly would protect the family. He had used her love for the Shin name as the instrument. She had believed every word. "She wasn't working against us," I told Jiwoo. "She was deceived by someone who has been doing this for 20 years. He was quiet. She still created a security risk. She's 27 and she was manipulated by a professional," I said. "She deserves to know the truth." He considered it. Then, "You're more generous than I would be in your position." "She came here and warned me to ask you why you chose me specifically," I said. "That's not someone who wants me gone. That's someone who wanted me to protect myself." He picked up his phone and called her directly. I left the room to give them privacy, but his words stayed with me, more generous than I would be, not a criticism, something closer to wonder. That was the night I stopped pretending, even to myself, that I was not falling for my contract husband. The attack came from the direction I had watched least carefully. Mrs. Kang had been still since her husband's legal troubles began. I had tracked Kang. I had tracked Commissioner Bay. I had not tracked her. She held a press conference on a Thursday morning. Pale yellow blazer, calm, practiced voice. She said she was not defending her husband, carefully framed, but felt obligated to provide context. Then she said that the woman claiming to be Shin Jiwoo's wife was a disgruntled former employee with a record of questionable conduct, and that she had documents raising serious concerns about the marriage's legitimacy. She released the documents to the press simultaneously. I read them within 15 minutes and knew they were fabricated. Well-made fakes, but false. The problem was that by 11:30, my name was trending across 3 platforms and my phone had not stopped vibrating. Tiho called, Jiwoo's communications director called, Yunya called, and her voice was sharp and clear. "Tell me what you need from me." I sat at the kitchen counter with my laptop and that specific cold clarity that comes when you have been here before. Being walked out of a room again, just differently. Except this time I wasn't being walked anywhere. This time I had a brown envelope's worth of evidence in a safe in Gapyeong. Jiwoo walked through the door at noon, looked at me across the room and said, "I've seen it. What do you want to do?" "Everything," I said. "Release all of it." We worked for 48 hours straight. Jiwoo's legal team prepared the formal filing. I worked with their digital forensics consultant through the night. Every timestamp, every altered signature on Kang's donation records, every inconsistency in the charity foundation's reported figures. The handwritten ledger page went to 4 independent document experts simultaneously. Sina arrived at the penthouse pale, determined, and ready. She used her network of society and business journalists methodically, not planting stories, creating questions. The right questions, asked to the right people, that made other journalists start pulling their own threads. Yunya handled the Shin family's position personally. I watched her make 7 phone calls in 90 minutes, each brief, each definitive. After the last one, she said, simply, "The family stands with you." Then she sat at the kitchen counter, made 2 cups of tea, and slid one toward me. You remind me of the woman I was before I learned to disappear into this family's expectations, she said. It was intended as a compliment. She looked at me over her cup. He watches you when you aren't looking. He has never watched anyone like that. I said nothing. I was wrong about what you were, she said. I want you to know I see it. It was the closest thing to a blessing I was going to receive. It landed more heavily than I expected. On the morning of day 3, we released everything. The legal filing, forensic evidence, physical documentation, a public statement that was clean, factual, and complete. By noon, Commissioner Bay had gone silent. By 3 in the afternoon, Kang's attorney announced his client was cooperating with all relevant authorities. By 6, the case files quietly shelved inside the Financial Investigations Division were reactivated and assigned to a new independent investigator. Day 58 of the required 60, 2 days remaining. We were at the kitchen counter at 7 in the morning, both reading, when I became aware of something I couldn't fully name. The coffee, the comfortable quiet, his habit of sliding the finished newspaper section toward me without looking up, the specific feeling of being somewhere I had not arrived at by accident. I put my phone down. What happens on day 61? I asked. He turned a page. The inheritance is secured. And after that, he set the paper down slowly. The agreement specified 60 days of public presence. After that, the terms were. I wrote the terms too, I said. I know what they were. We looked at each other across the counter in the morning light. What do you want to happen? He asked. The way he said it, stripped of all architecture, all careful distance, made it clear the answer genuinely mattered. I thought about a courthouse on a Tuesday morning, an envelope of cash, a note about my mother's surgery, a warm coffee cup on the floor, 48 hours standing shoulder to shoulder in a war room. The moment at 2 in the morning when he fell asleep in his chair, and I set his jacket over him, and he woke 20 minutes later and looked at me like he was deciding whether it was real. I want to know, I said carefully, why you chose my name specifically, out of everyone at Kang Industries. He looked at the counter. Because you flagged the discrepancy, he said. You did the right thing and were ignored and set up to take the blame. I needed someone with genuine integrity, and I thought someone should do something about what was happening to you, before the law eventually got around to it. That's not nothing, I said. No, Jiwoo, he looked up. I don't want to leave on day 61, I said. What moved across his face was not composed, not controlled. It was everything he had kept below the surface for 2 months, surfacing all at once. Then don't, he said. We didn't plan it. There was no event, no ceremony, no calendar entry in Tiho's schedule. On day 61, Jiwoo came home with a small box from a jewelry shop in Insadong, a tiny independent place I had mentioned once in passing, saying I thought it was beautiful as we walked past. He had listened. He had remembered. Inside were 2 rings, simple and specific and entirely without performance. I thought the first ones deserved to be replaced, he said. We should do it properly, just us, if that's what you want. We stood in the living room in our ordinary clothes, him in his work shirt with the sleeves pushed up, me in the plain gray dress I wore when I wasn't managing any impression for anyone. No photographer, no Tiho, no checklist. He put the ring on my finger. I put the other on his. He looked at me for a quiet, unhurried moment. I didn't know what I was choosing at the courthouse, he said. I know now. What are you choosing? I asked. You, specifically, entirely. A pause. If that's, I kissed him before he finished the sentence, which was the clearest answer either of us had given in 2 months. The trial, when it arrived, was not dramatic in the way people expected. There were hearings, document filings, forensic accountants, and 3 days of testimony about shell company structures, methodical and unsexy, and completely fatal to Kang Sung-ho. The handwritten ledger page from the brown envelope was the piece his legal team could not explain. His handwriting, his numbers, matching, transaction by transaction, a forensic audit that found 38 billion won buried under layers of corporate restructuring. Commissioner Bay submitted his resignation, for personal health reasons, 4 days before subpoenas reached his office. He was not quick enough. On the afternoon, the verdict came, 14 charges, 13 guilty. I was not in a courtroom. I was at the hospital with my mother. She was in the 4th week of her rehabilitation, walking laps of the corridor and arguing cheerfully with her physical therapist about whether she was allowed to try the stairs yet. She waved at me from the far end of the hallway like she was greeting me at an airport. Jiwoo drove himself to the hospital. No Tiho, no security detail. He sat beside me in the corridor and watched my mother convince her therapist to let her try one flight. "She called me last week," he said. I turned. "My mother called you. She wanted to ask about my intentions." He said it without expression, but something quietly amused sat underneath it. She seemed satisfied with my answers. "She also told me," he added more carefully, "that you used to come home from work and tell her you were fine and then cry. She wanted me to know that you don't always show when something is hurting you." I was quiet. She shouldn't have said that. I'm glad she did. He watched my mother reach the top of the staircase and throw her arms up in triumph. "I notice," he said simply. "I want you to know I notice." I leaned my head against his shoulder in the bright hospital corridor. "I know," I said. "You leave the coffee." The Shin Group board meeting to formalize the inheritance transfer was the kind of room I would have been invisible in a year ago. Long table, 15 board members, Jiwoo at the head and me beside him. I said nothing unless directly asked. When asked, I was precise. The board evaluated me carefully, professionally. I let them. Afterward in the corridor, the eldest board member, Director Yim Hee-sun, approached me, 37 years with the company. "I knew Dohan for a long time," she said. "He told me years ago that what Jiwoo needed wasn't someone designed for this world. It was someone who understood what it costs." She studied me steadily. I think he understood exactly what he was doing. I thought about precise handwriting on old paper. A brown envelope in a desk drawer. An old man trying to correct something before he ran out of time. "I think so too," I said. The transfer completed that afternoon. That evening, Jiwoo showed me a clause in his grandfather's private trust designating a significant portion of the estate for community foundation work, to be directed by the chairman's spouse. "That's me," I said slowly. "That's you." I looked at the figure on the document. "The Children's Education Fund," I said immediately. "The one Kang drained, we rebuild it, properly, with independent oversight that cannot be purchased." Jiwoo looked at me, not a 1-second, self-correcting expression, a real, unhurried, entirely genuine smile. That was new. I thought it might be my favorite thing I had ever seen. I had nearly stopped thinking about Mrs. Kang. The pale yellow blazer, the press conference, the fabricated documents. She had been quiet since her husband's arrest. Then my private number rang. "I'd like to speak with you," she said. Her voice was different, smaller. We met at a small tea house in Bukshan. She was already there, both hands wrapped around a cup, looking like a woman who had sat with the full weight of something and was still sitting with it. "I knew," she said before I had even ordered. "About the diverted money, not from the beginning, from about 2 years ago. I found something in his desk." She looked at the table. "I convinced myself it wasn't mine to act on." She looked up. "I released documents about you. I was afraid. I thought if the case against you held, it might reduce what was coming for him. I was protecting the only life I had built. At your expense, I know that." She reached into her bag and placed a small drive on the table. His personal files, things he kept off the company's servers. I decided I needed to stop protecting choices I wasn't brave enough to question when I had the chance. I looked at the drive. "I can't promise this helps your situation in any specific way. I know, that's not why." She picked up her tea. "I wanted to do one right thing, before everything was entirely settled about what kind of person I turned out to be." I picked up the drive. I did not forgive her at that table. Forgiveness is not something you manufacture over tea, but I understood her. And sometimes understanding has to be the beginning. The drive contained private communications between Kang and 2 board members the prosecution had not yet identified. It expanded the case significantly. She accepted a cooperation arrangement. Sina came to the foundation office on a Wednesday afternoon. I had opened it 6 weeks earlier, 2 staff, a small rented space in Mapo with good light and a view of the street. She knocked on the open door while I was reviewing education program proposals from 4 different community organizations. "I want to help," she said. No introduction, no softening. I looked up. She was still composed and precise in the way she carried herself, and she looked like someone who had recently completed a very honest audit of her own history and was ready to do something with the findings. "What do you bring?" I asked. "I know every major private foundation in Seoul that has improperly managed charitable funds," she said. "Not because I'm one of them, because I've sat at their dinners and their board tables for 5 years and watched it happen and said nothing. I know their structures, their vulnerabilities, which oversight boards are functional and which are decoration. I can build you a monitoring framework that makes what Kang did genuinely harder to repeat." I studied her. "What do you want in return?" "Nothing. Direct, steady. I was used as a tool against you. I want the direction of my usefulness to change." She started the following Monday. She was, as it turned out, exceptional. Within 2 months, she had documented 41 foundation governance structures and flagged 8 with gaps significant enough for independent review. One evening, walking out together, she said, "I misjudged you completely." "I know," I said. "Most people did. I think I started to understand at the gala, actually, when I heard what you said to that journalist." "He walked into a room and decided I was worth staying for," I said. "Every word technically true," she said. "That's a particular kind of intelligence." "Survival habit," I said. "No," she said. "It's dignity. There's a real difference." Shin Do-han's annual memorial was held at the Gapyeong estate on a cool Saturday in late autumn. The pine trees had turned gold at the edges. 70 family members, longtime associates, and people from the old man's life filled the garden for the ceremony. I stood beside Jiwoo in the front position, communicating clearly to everyone present that I was not temporary and not uncertain. Some faces were familiar from the family dinner. Many were new. All of them had opinions. I let them. After the ceremony, at the reception, an elderly man in his late 80s found me near the pine trees. He had the quiet, settled look of someone who had been friends with Do-han for decades. "You're the one who opened the envelope," he said. "He spoke about it in his last months," the old man said. "He said he had put something in motion. He was worried it wouldn't be enough, that he had started the damage and might not live to finish the repair." "He left exactly what was needed," I said. "He left Jiwoo exactly what Jiwoo needed," the old man said gently. "That boy has carried too much alone for too long. Do-han knew he would never choose for himself. He needed someone chosen for him in a way that felt like coincidence but wasn't." Across the garden, Jiwoo was talking to family members, composed, attentive, fully present. Then, as if he felt me looking, his eyes found mine. A small gesture, just a tilt of his chin. "Are you all right?" I answered the same way. "Yes." The old man watched the exchange. "Yes," he said softly. "I believe it was enough." 6 months after the gala, the foundation had completed its first full grant cycle. 16 education programs across 5 cities, 280 children. Coverage had been careful and factual and had, at my request, kept my name out of the headline. Kang Sung-ho had received his sentence. Commissioner Bae was awaiting his. My mother had moved to a small apartment 3 subway stops from the foundation office and had begun volunteering there on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, which had not been part of anyone's plan, but which quietly made everyone involved happier. Yunya had visited the foundation twice. She had not rearranged a single thing. On an ordinary Tuesday evening, Jiwoo came into the study where I was working and set a document folder on the desk. "The board wants to establish the foundation as a permanent independent structure," he said. "Properly endowed, long-term governance." "That's good," I said. "It means formalizing your role, legal directorship, public-facing." He paused. "Your name in the headline." "People who knew me as Kang's assistant will make the connection." "Yes. They'll write about the gala, the firing, the entire sequence." "Almost certainly. That's significant." "Yes," he said. "But you told me once that you had spent your life regretting things for other people and decided to stop. This is your name, your work, you should own it." I picked up the pen, signed. He watched me, then, "I need to tell you something, not for any document, just for us." I put the pen down. "I didn't fall in love with you during the 60 days, he said. "I fell in love with you on day 3 at this counter when you asked if there was a performance review at 90 days. He looked at the desk. "I didn't know what to do with that, so I did nothing. I am better at doing nothing than I should be." "I know," I said. "You left coffee outside my door." I was trying to... I know what you were trying to do. I reached across the desk and took his hand. Jiwoo, I know. He turned his hand over, held mine. Okay, he said, just that one word. Like the exhale at the very end of something long and difficult and finally done. The article ran on a Friday morning. Park Mina and the new Standard for Charitable Governance in Korea, front page of the business section, the most widely read paper in the country. My name at the top, my photograph. The work described accurately and completely in print for the very first time. Not Shin Jiwoo's wife, not Kang Sung-ho's former assistant, not the girl from the courthouse or the woman who was walked out of the gala. Just Park Mina, who built something real. I read it at the kitchen counter in the early morning light with coffee I had made myself, because I no longer waited for notes under doors. I sat beside the man who used to leave them. Jiwoo read it beside me. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then my phone began. My mother first, 3 voice messages in a row. And then a photograph of her standing in the foundation office holding up the newspaper with both hands, grinning like she had won something. Because she had. We both had. Tiho, a single message in full capital letters. CONGRATULATIONS, SAMONIM. The most emotional I had ever seen him. Sina, a voice note. She was crying and absolutely refusing to acknowledge it. Director Yim from the board. A formal brief email ending with, Dohan would have been very pleased. And at the very bottom of my notifications, a message from a number I didn't have saved. I read the article this morning. I owe you more than I can put in a message. Thank you for not letting everything end at my husband's arrest. The children's programs are what matters most. HK. Mrs. Kang. I set my phone face down on the counter. I sat there, and I let myself feel the full weight of everything that had led to this moment. I thought about a ballroom and 2 security guards and the long, burning click of my heels across marble while 200 people watched. I thought about an envelope of cash on a lawyer's table. A note slipped under a door. A cup of coffee left warm on a floor. A brown envelope in a desk drawer. An old man who had spent his final months trying to correct something before he ran out of time. I thought about who I was the morning of that gala, worn thin, alone, swallowing words for a man who didn't deserve the silence, working myself down to nothing for a company that had already decided how to use me and throw me away, telling my mother every night that I was fine. I thought about who I was right now, at this counter, in this kitchen, in this life that I had built piece by piece with my own hands and my own voice and the decision, finally, firmly, for the last time, to stop apologizing for existing. Jiwoo refilled my coffee without being asked, the way he always did now, quietly, without ceremony, because it had stopped being a gesture and become simply what he did. I watched him and understood something clearly, the way you understand things that have been true for a while before you find the right words for them. This is what it looks like on the other side. Not a reward, not a fairy tale ending with music and a perfect bow. Just a Friday morning with warm coffee and a man who knows the full truth of who you are, where you came from, what it cost you, what you are still becoming, and woke up today and chose you anyway. I had walked out of that ballroom with nothing. I had built everything that came after with my own strength, not because someone rescued me, not because I got lucky, but because I stopped wilting, because I read the fine print, because I walked into a room full of people who had already decided what I was, and I refused, quietly and completely, to be that. That is the whole story. And sitting there that Friday morning, with the newspaper on the counter and my mother's photograph on my phone and Jiwoo's coffee warm in my hands, I was not grateful for what I had survived. I was proud of who I had become because of it. That is the only ending worth having. Park Mina, foundation director, wife, daughter, herself entirely, unapologetically at last. And that is the full story of Park Mina, the woman who was publicly humiliated, set up, and discarded, and who turned every single one of those moments into the foundation of something that could not be taken from her. If this story moved you, if there was a moment where you held your breath, or felt your chest tighten, or found yourself whispering yes at your screen, then you already know this channel is where you belong. But before you go anywhere, I need you to do one thing right now. Drop a comment below and tell me where you are watching from, your city, your country. Let's see exactly how far this story has traveled. I read every single comment and I want to hear from you. And if you are not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button right now. Every week, this channel brings you stories exactly like this one. Stories about real strength, real betrayal, real justice, and real endings that actually satisfy. The next story is already coming, and I promise you, it will keep you just as glued as this one did. Subscribe, comment your location, and I will see you in the next one.